Well, in Nigeria, residents may have to brace up for another increase in electricity tariffs due to take effect next year.
That's right. Consumers will pay about 1.52 trillion naira for power. This is about 600 billion naira higher than the estimated 900 billion naira which the electricity distribution companies expect to make this year. Meanwhile, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has kicked against this move by the government, saying a hike in electricity tariff without any improvement in supply would have negative effects on the manufacturing sector. And to react to this issue, former chairman of Presidential Task Force on Power, Beks Dagogo Jack, joins us from our Abuja studio. It's good to have you and good afternoon. Now, tariff increment is usually a sensitive issue for most consumers in Nigeria due to inadequacies in that power sector. Now, how justified is this new proposal?
Thank you. I think we should get the facts right. First and foremost, the law says that the regulator must review tariff at a regular interval. So the 2020 major review is obedience to the law. So the law must be obeyed. And secondly is that the elements that make up the tariff, some of them are variables that must be passed through the cost, like, say, foreign exchange. The assumption for foreign exchange in the last review was 305 per dollar. It is way more than that, almost 22% more than that. Gas, what is the price of gas? There are elements in the tariff that must be passed through to the full tariff cost. And you cannot run an electricity market that is insensitive to the cost reflectiveness of a tariff. Thirdly is that for all the noise or all the complaints we make, we are still on 4,000 megawatts of electricity. And we need 5 times that to be slightly comfortable as an economy. So if you're talking about scale, if you're talking about challenge on 4,000 megawatts for tariff, then you don't want to grow. I think that the essence of a tariff is to attract investors in. Federal government, state governments can never push us 5 times the current tariff level. If the current supply level, if they could have done it, they would have done it and wouldn't need to privatize. But once we have privatized, you're asking for private sector to come in and drive the market for you, drive the supply for you, and provide services for you. And we proved it in the telcos. The telcos, I bought my first mobile set for about 120,000 naira. And now it costs little or nothing. Everybody knows that when you allow supply to ramp up to a particular level, it balances the market. In the supply segment, you have industrial consumers, you have commercial consumers. They are going to pay a lot more. And because you have supplied enough to cover their needs, they will roll off from the generating sets and they will all come onto the grid. They pay a lot more. You have some room to cover the residential market, which is more price sensitive. So I think that there is valid sense in reviewing the tariff.
Mr. Dagogo Jack, listen, it's no secret that electricity is a huge problem in this country, and it's the repercussions of that trickle down to everybody. Farmers struggle, children can't study at nighttime, households don't have freezers. Why should, with due respect, why should Nigerians pay more when the power outages are still the same, the quality is still the same?
Yeah, but you seem to have put the argument in the wrong order. Why do I say so? You have to pay more for more power to come on board, because more power comes on board, then your price comes down. You only have 4,000 megawatts. You have to build more generation capacity. They won't come in unless your tariff is right. You have to build more transmission capacity. They cannot do that unless the tariff is right. So you set the tariff, it's like mousetrapping. You set the tariff and then the investors come in. Investors come in, they ramp up supply. Supply goes up, then price comes down, as it has been the case in every economic model. So this won't be much different. The problem we have is that we haven't done the right things to ramp up supply at the pace that it should happen. in the telcos, all of us know that the ramp-up pace was very high. I mean, I know that back in the day before the telcos were privatized, I don't think the country had up to 150,000 lines of telephone lines. We probably are in the order of 100 million lines as I speak with you. So this is the reality of how privatization works. But sometimes I think we get carried away. On one hand, we have accepted that we've privatized. On the other hand, we think it's a government business to give us free electricity. We really have to come to terms with what we want.
Very good, Mr. Dagogo Jack. Now, let's calm down a little. Let's look at the metering system for most consumers. Not many have prepaid meters, and estimated billing is still rampant. What's your take in line with the proposed increment?
Yeah, the connection between metering and tariff should be properly understood. There is no place in the market for estimated billing. But when we say that, we also must be fair in accepting that in today's Nigeria, we probably have the highest level of energy theft. So you're putting the discos under pressure by asking them to own energy supplied, which they did not see, and you ask them to pay for it. So you're creating tension in the market. So again, we have enough technology to make sure that we can reduce energy theft to the barest minimum. We have the smart technologies in the electricity grid right down to the household and the metering technologies that can account for that. But it costs money, and the discos are not incentivized to go down that route. Some of them do not even see the motivation to do that because they can use estimated billing to cover the energy theft gap as far as they can go. But that's not a proper market. That's not a transparent market. So we can't talk about metering, whether it is prepaid or postpaid. That's not as much the issue as the fact that a lot of the energy that is sent to them are not accounted for through various forms of theft that is going on at that level.
Also, you've talked about the pressure on the discos. If we were to talk about the performance of the discos over time since their emergence, I mean, how would you rate them so far?
I would say that they have struggled with the market. A few of them have done way better than others. I would also say that when the privatization was planned, there was no sense that we got into a lifetime marriage arrangement with the discos to the extent that we cannot review the contracts, to the extent that we cannot make adjustments as to how far a particular investor has shown capacity for the asset he's been given, and whether we should let him struggle with it or we can do things that will bring out the best result for the country, for the customer. I don't think we can say because they are struggling, we should allow them to sink the market. There are provisions to engage with each of them and redesign elements of the relationship that sustain service delivery without necessarily punishing them beyond the fact that they are proving they are not capable to do certain things. But the country is not going to fold their hands and watch when they are not capable in doing certain things. And the regulator and the ministry have the law backing them to make sure that they intervene, to make sure that discos do not hold the market to ransom.
Very good. And still on the issue, while this struggle persists on performance, as you alluded to earlier, energy allocated to discos by 2020 is expected to increase. What if there's a shortfall in that projection and consumers are billed to pay more? Shouldn't there be palliatives for consumers themselves?
Okay. Yeah, but first and foremost, I think you recognize that the regulator also by law is empowered to do minor reviews. So the essence of minor reviews before the major review is to address some of those issues that you just mentioned, a situation where there is not enough correlation between supply and the some of the assumptions made in the tariff model. So those kind of manual reviews happen. They don't need to have as much publicity as they need to have. But let me go straight to tell you that the 2020 figures you are looking at will not be more than, give or take, 30 billion kilowatt hours, because the 2018 performance is around 26 billion kilowatt hours. Let's assume some marginal increase, but that is even a cautious projection, knowing all the challenges we are facing currently in the market. So at 30 billion kilowatt hours, you are looking at about 280, 270 kilowatt hours per capita. That is the quality, that's the level of supply in Nigeria. South Africa is in the order of 3,800 kilowatt hours per capita. Average Europe is about 5,800 kilowatt hours per capita. We are struggling with 280. Just to give you a sense that we don't have supply. So this idea of people saying, why should we pay, why shouldn't we pay? We have to do what brings in supply. When supply is adequate, it naturally deals with pricing issue. But if you cannot model a game that brings in supply, how can you be talking about pricing? People are not coming into the market now because they can't see the model for getting their money back. So we create the model for getting their money back. They ramp up interest. Interest delivers supply. Supply deals with pricing. It's not rocket science.
Okay, listen, let's get back to the money. That's what I'm really interested about. If we still look at the dynamics of this tariff increase, the manufacturing sector, for example, they're said not to be pleased with it. What are the implications of that?
Briefly, please.
Briefly.
Yeah, the manufacturing sector is critical. It's a real sector of the economy, is the greatest employer of labor, pretty much pays most of the taxes that run the system. You can't just overlook them. What I don't want us to take our eyes off of is the fact that we don't have enough. So let us model around getting enough. But talking about the manufacturing sector, I think there must be reality check there. As we speak, almost all of them are struggling with self-generation. The cost of diesel generation, direct cost, is around 114, 115 naira per kilowatt hour. That does not include the capital cost of acquisition and the cost of maintaining those assets. It does not include the cost of pollution, environmental pollution, the cost of fire hazards. If you price all of this in, we're doing somewhere in the order of 160 naira per kilowatt hour for self-generation. Now, currently, the average tariff we can talk about in Nigeria is in the 60s, 61, 62, 63, 64, depending on which disco and the assumptions used to design their tariff. So if you're talking about 65, even 65 naira, relative to 160, you begin to imagine why are they complaining if there's a marginal increase?
All right, Beks Dagogo Jack, unfortunately we have to end here. Would like to thank you very much for your thoughts on those issues. Good to have you.